All right, so I wasn't planning on making any kind of videos today, but this Andrew Wilson and Candace Owens thing is really catching some attention, and it seems silly because I've said these things already, but of course, I mean, I don't really have a big following, so um, doesn't hurt to say it again. I want to talk about I want to try it as quickly as I can because I don't have a whole lot of more phone space on my phone to do this. But I want to quickly just try to the Candace cult, the cult of Candace. Boy, look, let me just. I'm a Christian and I do evangelism. Okay, I go downtown. Gonna go this Saturday. We're gonna go and do our evangelism and everything like that. Um, I have encountered in my years of doing this kind of stuff here, and then other states and stuff like that. I have encountered many cults, and not even just on the streets, but even online and stuff like that. You know, the Jehovah's Witnesses typically before the internet would always tell their people don't pay attention to those guys, and the Mormons would do that. The LDS, they would do that. You know, don't listen to those people. You know, just stay away from them. And then that's the same kind of rhetoric you get out of you know people from the Candace cult. Don't engage with these people. They're bad faith. You know that it's the same behavior. It's the same exact behavior. Don't talk to them. You know, they're just bad. They're just not good people. They're just gonna, they just the cults constantly do that kind of thing. They don't. And they make excuses for it. Well, they're just bad people. They're just they're anti-Mormons and anything like that. You know, they do all of that stuff. Um, and one has to wonder why. I think it's because, look, we would show up at you know LDS temples, and we would go out and we deliberately talk to Jehovah's Witnesses who have their little stands. And I've had Jehovah's Witnesses come to the door, and I've been like, "Hey, let's talk about the Bible. Let's do it." Um, so we go to them. Try to talk to them. I would say, like, if they tried to come over to my church and said, "Hey, we're just doing what you guys do," I'd walk right out there and I'd talk to them. I'd be, "Hey, let's have a conversation." So I certainly don't disagree with them coming to me at all, but they don't. You know, they want their people to stay away. um, so again, one has to wonder why. You know, for me, I'm confident what I believe is true. I'm willing to have that conversation, and that's the point I'm trying to make here. Now, there are other activities, certain behaviors that cultists tend to engage in, and those are threats of violence. um, they also lie. They also distort truth. They also will try and create narratives. They do these kinds of things all the time. LDS people, if they would actually read their actual history, not the history that their church gives them, they'd be in for quite a rude awakening. Um, and now, I don't find that LDS people are very violent, and that's good. They're typically very nice people. Um, I have seen Jehovah's Witnesses act a little funny, a little weird. I have most certainly seen the Black Hebrew Israelites on more than one occasion. My own life was threatened by one of these people. Um, she said to me, you know, when she was getting more and more belligerent as I was trying to talk to her, and then she just eventually said to me, "I know people, and they'll find you." And I was like, "Ma'am, did you just threaten me?" And she's like, "No, I didn't." I was like, "I think you just threatened me." And I just went, "Okay, you know what? We're done." I just said, "We're done talking." So normally I give people my name, sometimes even contact info if they want to keep talking. I definitely was not going to give her any information. so, so yeah, the Black Hebrew Israelites are known to be typically can be very violent, very confrontational. Excuse me. Ooh, it's still hot. Um, so yes, and I just gotta say, the Candy cult, the cult of Candace, behave the exact same way. They behave the exact same way. They tell their people, don't debate anybody. Tucker Carlson, he never brings on anybody who's going to challenge what he believes. He only brings on people who are going to affirm what he believes. Um, and that's one of the reasons why I was disillusioned by Tucker. For a while I was defending Tucker. I was kind of on his side on a lot of things. But I started noticing that his critics were making some good points and he would never address his critics. And I started wondering, you know, I'm somebody who, when I became a Christian and I wanted to know what truth was, I wanted to know where to go. I would watch a lot of debates, theology debates, formal debates, not the stuff you see on Piers Morgan and what you see like Andrew Wilson's and Candace Owens is probably going to end up being if it actually happens. I would watch these formal debates where you have opening statements by both sides, and then you have cross examinations, and then rebuttals, and then you would have closing statements, maybe some more cross examination before the closing statements, depends on how the debate was formatted, and everything like that. I would watch those kind of debates, and I would think a lot about what each side was saying. I would watch these debates and see the thing for me is the cross examination is the part where the debate you really see where the rubber meets the road, where if this position can really truly stand on its own when it is confronted with criticism. And I say that because both parties in that debate are putting their position out there to be scrutinized. In other words, they're willing to have that conversation. When you're not willing to do that, I start asking questions. I start wondering. We're all about asking questions, right? That's when I start to wonder. And that's what happened with Tucker and me. I started to going, why isn't he willing to, he just acts like all his critics aren't really there. Probably because Tucker knows that what he is pushing is if he allows it to be scrutinized in front of his face, it's not going to look well for him. Tucker has a following. He wants to keep that following. He wants to grow that following with a bunch of the weirdos on the internet who don't have anything better to do with themselves. And that's it. It makes him money. I mean, I've been hearing a lot of stuff that he's been losing a lot of followers, but who knows? I mean, I don't know. He's just recently had Hunter Biden on, and of course they blame the laptop thing on Israel without giving any proof. Like no proof whatsoever. Just none. He just says it, and he says it, and the way Tucker says it too is frightening because it's just like gaslighting. Oh yeah, Israel, and that's a fact. Yeah, they absolutely did. Like there's just no denying. Like what the heck's your evidence? Like what are you talking about? But see, nobody's gonna call him on it because everybody who's on there with him or is already agreeing with him and everything he's saying. So now I was watching a live stream of this guy I just found, and he's just like making fun of Candace and this debate with Wilson. He's clearly on Wilson's side. And then he just did a live stream responding to that. I forget the name of the guy on YouTube. I used to watch him a lot before Charlie Kirk was assassinated. I used to like a lot of his content. He's when he was sticking to his lane, he was pretty good. And then he just kind of fell off the radar for me, and then now I've seen him come back up, and now he's just a total Candace culty fanatic. But he's like really, really buff. He's this big dude. He's a lot into guns and whatever. He used to wear a MAGA hat and everything like that. And he's always just kind of this tough guy attitude. Whatever. But after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, I watched some of his videos fresh after he was killed, and he was of course defending Erica, and he was going after people who were going after Erica. I'm sure by now he's changed his tune. But he was also, after Charlie was assassinated, he was already quick to jump on, but possible conspiracy theories about, this is before they caught Charlie's assassin, and. So, making note of these planes, weird plane activity, flying from Um, um, what was it? Was it Ogden? I forget exactly where. Um, in Utah to Arizona. I think it was to Phoenix, Arizona. And now, look, here's the thing. um, I was kind of jumping on because I was getting to the point. At one point, I was like, "Man, dude, what Charlie's going to become the next JFK? You know, there's a conspiracy, you know." And you know, I was genuinely terrified that the 72 some odd hours before Charlie Kirk's assassin was found, because I was starting to think that we were dealing with an actual professional, and if he was going to get away with this, what other conservative commentator is going to be next? I mean, that was genuinely terrifying me. I was so scared. I remember the day after Charlie was killed. No. I think it was the day that he was. It was the day that he was killed. I went to one of our church's Bible studies, and I went there, and I was just my heart was so heavy, and it turned out so many other people there were too. It's amazing how many people Charlie affected. We were all just horribly saddened, and we were praying a lot, you know, and we were talking a lot about it after the Bible study, before and after. But we hadn't found the killer yet, you know. And I was just praying. I kept checking the news. Please, somebody, please give me news that we found him, because if we don't find him, man, I'm afraid that, you know, he might have gotten away with it, and he's gonna kill somebody else. And I was so scared. I really was. And I admit that when they did eventually find him, I wanted it. This has to be him, because it will alleviate my fear. So yes, I wanted Tyler. The moment we found out that he caught him, I wanted him. I was like, my brain was subconsciously saying, this is it. This is the guy. Like, it has to be him, because if it's not, I don't know what I'm gonna do. So yeah, I'll admit there's a little bit of bias, but over the months, the evidence becomes more and more clear that it was him. Now here's the thing, before I get into that, like I said, I was starting to get into, because I never really watched Charlie before, so I didn't, you know, as probably most people, but I started watching clips and videos about Charlie like a month before he was killed on Megyn Kelly, talking about, you know, Jewish donors and how he's angry at these Jewish donors for him platforming people like Tucker Carlson. And he was like telling them basically, stick it where the sun don't shine. I'm gonna platform who I want. And then of course a month later he's dead. Charlie Kirk, you know, criticized initially, you know, didn't think it was a good idea to attack Iran. And then, you know, he's killed a month or a little while later, and then we go and attack Iran. You know, it's very weird stuff. You know, I can definitely see, I can totally see why that would make you kind of go, you know. I get it. I totally get it. I understand. But over the last few, I guess I don't know. It's just like I'd like to say that I just kind of just took some time off and just to kind of get my bearings. And look, here's the thing. I just wanted to be clear here. I am no Israel shill. I didn't get my 7K. Boy, I could really use that right now. I'll be honest with you. I could definitely use 7K right now. But I don't have that. I did not get $7,000. So I am you can talk to my dispensational friends. They will tell you I am definitely not Israel is the chosen people of God kind of guy. I don't believe that stuff, okay? I'm not dispensationalist by any means, not premillennialist at all. I'm far more covenantal in my views. And my dispy friends, they will definitely tell you, as much as Chase is wrong, that is what he believes. They'll tell you that. But so I just wanted to make that clear. I have no theological interest to defend Israel at all, and none of this is even to defend Israel. That's not what this is about at all. Okay. So that being said, I was willing to embrace that Israel maybe had something to do with it, because I was starting to get into a lot of the Israel conspiracies. I really was. Then a friend of mine kind of knocked some sense into me. he just basically started asking me questions, you know, and I just kind of had to go, yeah, you're right, man. Like, and I just was like, what the heck am I doing? Like, man, how did I get this far into this? It's a weird thing, man. When these kind of conspiracy theories, what they can do to you, it's really really strange. You kind of don't even know you've run into this rabbit hole. And it reminds me a lot of Shutter Island. If you haven't seen the movie, be warned, because you should watch the movie, because I'm about to spoil the ending for you. But in the very end of Shutter Island, when the doctor is explaining everything to Leonardo DiCaprio's character and what's happening, I remember when I first watched it, I refused to believe. I was like, this guy he's just toying with him. He's just messing with our boy Leonardo's character. We've invested in his character. He's the good guy. We know he's the good guy. The doctor's the bad guy. He's the evil, Frankenstein experimenting doctor guy. We just know it. And as this was being revealed, everything was being revealed more and more. You see what DiCaprio's character does. He has all these reasons to not believe him, and he takes all the information and his brain reinterprets it differently to see something different. And no matter what the doctor explains to him, the one point when the doctor says to him, you've invented a fantasy that. And in this fantasy, the reason why you're here is because you've actually uncovered a conspiracy, so that anything we tell you about what you've done and who you are and what you've done, you can just dismiss as lies, And DiCaprio's character is so mentally gone. This fantasy has become his reality, and it is so deep and so strong that even when facts are presented, he's like, they have to be lies. There's no way they can be true, because everybody's out to get me. That's that extreme paranoia that happens typically with people like this. It's very common in conspiracy theorists, fanatics. They develop this sense of paranoia. Everyone's out to get them because they're on to the conspiracy. And yet in reality, the truth was, Teddy lost his mind because of what happened to him, and he became a monster as a result of it. He refused to deal with the truth. The truth was, the doctor, who was somehow implicated in communistic, satanic, rituals and whatever, was just a doctor trying to help him. The truth was, the simplest explanation was actually the real thing. By the way, people say, we don't know if Teddy, it could be, I'm telling you, Teddy was nuts, because there's no way the doctor could have known about the dreams, because Teddy never told them to anybody other than his I think his partner, but he never told told specifics about the dreams he was having. Yet the doctor knew him, because Teddy had said those things while being a patient. So he was clearly nuts. He was clearly out of his mind. So I say things like that because what I notice with a lot of these conspiracy theorists, well, let me put it this way. Again, I keep reminding people that, I love history. I'm a big history geek. I love just learning about history. I'm learning about the history of Prussia right now. Been learning about German history, beyond just Hitler and all that stuff like that. And I enjoy it. Doing history, though, requires a certain method of study, a particular method in which you have to apply these particular methods to know what's true and what isn't, and what is potentially true and what's speculative and whatever. How do we know certain historical things are true? Because we have the documents, we have the actual things that tell us that these things happened, and there you go. even if they were a long time ago and they were top secret back then, but not anymore. We have the data, we have the information, we have it all, and we can see what was actually going on. You need evidence, you need data, you need actual hard data. If you don't have that, what you have are, just some surface level facts, like a thing happened, but you don't have the further details about what happened under, like, more in a more deeper level. You don't have that kind of stuff. I'm trying to think here. For instance, I like to use Custer's Last Stand because that's something I was always fascinated with. Custer's Last Stand. What do we know happened? Well, what we know happened is Custer took his 7th Cavalry to try and take out the Indians, get Sitting Bull, and take the glory all for himself. Splits his guys up into 3 groups. Doesn't realize what he's actually up against. And we know that he goes off to the far right. He sends one of his guys straight down the center at the Indians, the natives, and then the other guy goes far left in case someone will try to get away. He can kind of round him up. We actually don't even know if that's why he sent him out there, because there's no official thing. Like, he just sent him out there. We can assume that. See, that's the thing. So we know that then Custer goes off. No one ever sees him alive ever again. No one who lives anyway sees him alive ever again. Next time they find him, he's dead. He's got a bullet wound to the head. He's got one to the chest. And then he's been slashed in the thigh, Lakota tradition, and he got stabbed in the where. That's the next time we see him, and he's dead. All of his men are dead. Now that's what we know. Everything else is speculative. You can speculate, and I think you can draw good, based on what we know, you can draw good conclusions. That what I think happened, for instance, I think Custer's plan was he's going to send Reno, this guy who went down this kind of straight down the center, straight at the Indians, the natives. That what Custer was counting on Reno doing was he was going to just ride straight into the camp, cause a bunch of panic and confusion, send the natives scrambling. They're going to run away from Reno, which is going to be in the direction of Custer when he comes around this way. So Reno's coming this way, Custer's going to go around. Well, I'm going to do it from your angle. Reno's going to go this way, Custer's going to go around the hills this way and scare the Indians off like this. They're going to go out like that, and then Custer's going to come around, and they're just going to meet right in the middle right there, and just victory. Anybody who gets off onto the left, Benteen, the one he sent off, Custer sent off to the left, was going to round them up. I think that is what Custer's plan was. Now, what happened, of course, was Reno was routed. He panicked and got overwhelmed. And that did not cause the panic of the natives that was intended to happen. Instead, Reno gets chased away. And then when Custer comes down, is expecting to find a Reno. Instead, he finds a bunch of natives swarming him like bees. And he's forced back up the ford, off into the hills over there, where he's surrounded and his men are chopped down. That's what I think happened. Now, here's the thing. We don't know for sure. You can even get really close to that and go, I mean, that's probably what happened. There's tons of evidence that suggests that's probably what happened. But we don't know. We can't truly know. You just can't. So the point is that there is a level of knowledge that can be certain, but then there's a level of knowledge that just can't be. It just can't be certain. And I think Andrew Wilson's point is very simple. It's the same point I make. If you don't have sure knowledge, shut up. Just don't, it's one thing to say, like the guy I was watching that made me start this video. I was watching his video making fun of Candace. He said at the very beginning, look, I can be convinced that Israel did it. The problem is there's no evidence. There's no actual evidence. And the Candace cult, the cult of Candace, just won't admit that. They just won't. You know, and as a result of not admitting that, they think they're really investigating something, and they're not. They're not investigating anything. Like Andrew Wilson said to the guy he actually debated yet so far. He said to the guy, "What have you learned in these last few months?" And the guy just couldn't answer his question because he hasn't learned anything. Because you don't have anything. There's nothing. There's just nothing there. Well, and then I saw a clip of Andrew on his Crucible page. He debated some of these guys in this webcast thing about the Charlie Kirk killing and the conspiracy theories around it. And one of the guys was like saying, well, he's pointing to he had these donors, and these donors didn't like that Charlie Kirk was platforming these people, and they just lost control of Charlie. And it's like, look, see, look, it's again the Custer thing. Like, it's plausible. That's certainly plausible. But where's your evidence? Where's the evidence? That's what we're asking for. That's all we're asking for. And it was funny in the same debate thing. Andrew really got into it with one of these guys. Andrew's like, look, there's because the investigators. Andrew's like directly telling this guy, "You're not an investigator. You guys aren't investigators. You guys don't know what you're talking about, And the other guy was just like basically saying, I forget exactly how the whole conversation went, but the guy was like, "Oh yeah, we gotta just trust the investigators, like yeah, right, And Andrew's like, "Well, who else are we supposed to trust? Like the people who actually do this kind of thing for their job. That's who we're supposed to trust, dude." And the other guy was just like, "No, we don't. We can't trust them. We just can't trust them, And then Andrew's like, "Who do we trust? You?" He's like, "No, not me. We should trust, And then I forgot what the guy said, but basically it goes back to the investigators because they're the ones who are doing everything, So it's like, what, but I'm listening to this and I'm just going, see, this is the problem right here. See, these conspiracy theorists, they are so, look, they're all burned by COVID. I get it. COVID and the Epstein files. Totally get it. Again, I understand. By the way, I was one of the, not that my opinion matters, but, I was pressured a lot by a lot of friends who were buying into the COVID stuff when it first started. And I was just like, dude, I don't know, man. I felt the pressure, and I was starting to feel like maybe I am wrong about this. I had some really friends that I really respected about it, and they've all come around to realize that they were wrong. And I never gave in. I never got the vaccine. I never got the shot. And I didn't get none of that stuff. I just eventually kept my mouth shut because I was just like, I just don't know what's going on here. I'm gonna wait till more information comes out. And I got to a point where I wasn't wearing masks anymore. I was like, screw this noise. I'm not gonna wear these masks. They don't do anything. I know that much. And I was right. So look, I was one of the few who was like, this COVID stuff is a bunch of stupid silliness. I'm not following this anymore. I'm not doing it. So I get it, man. I totally get it. See, the problem here is people who it's like people who get traumatized really easily, like not really easy, but people who get traumatized, then they just kind of like, the defense mechanisms are formed typically to protect them from more trauma. The brain does that kind of stuff. For instance, for me, when I was a kid, I rolled my ankle really badly one time. I think I nearly broke it. It definitely deformed it. My foot's still kind of awkward as a result. I never let it heal properly. But now, anytime I just slightly just kind of go like that with my ankle, my body will just immediately, it's like subconscious, it's an involuntary thing. I will just collapse because my body just protects itself from enduring that kind of trauma ever again. I don't even think about it. It just, as soon as the ankle starts to roll, it's like, oh, I'm going down. My leg just will not put pressure on that foot at all. It'll just be like, we'd rather just collapse, hit the ground, but on that bout, other than just put pressure on that heel, not the heel, but the ankle, and possibly break it again. Especially as I'm getting older, definitely don't want that to happen. So this the trauma response. It's just suddenly, it's just like, The trauma responses, defense mechanisms tend to be very irrational. And so you go, COVID got me, and I got screwed up with COVID. I lost it, and they ain't gonna get me again. They ain't gonna get me again. And so now they're just like, the whole institution is just evil and wicked and satanic and blah, blah. And now it's an irrational fear. Now that's how you get into the conspiracy theories. They lied to us about COVID. Now they're lying to us about everything. And literally, it's all evil. Can't trust any of it. None of our institutions. They're all 100% untrustworthy now. Nothing they say is worthwhile. And I just look at that and I just go, look, does the government lie? Yeah, they do. But are they lying all the time? No, not all the time. You have to learn how to, I just think it's mature. It's mature thinking to know when, you got to put the brakes on these things. Like, okay, at a certain point, you're taking this way, way too far. And so I just, one of my problems with a lot of this is the same problem I have with radical skepticism. So people who question, the authenticity of the Bible and its historicity and everything like that, they'll use modern standards. Like, well, we got to have, we just don't have any like actual evidence. What they mean by evidence, even though they may not actually admit this, but what they mean by evidence is no video evidence of what actually happened. And I go, if you take that logic to its conclusion, then you can't know anything in history up until the last, 100 years? You don't know anything ever happens. We have all these documents, but just no video evidence, so we don't know if somebody would just scribble this down just at some point back in the 40s or in the 1900s, early, 1905 and stuff like that. That could have been. You just don't know. See, that's what happens when you go down the radical skepticism route. When you just basically say, pics where it never happened. Okay, well then apparently nothing happened before the invention of the cameras and things like that. So that's where this stuff goes. It's like, if you can't trust institutions on any level whatsoever, you can't really know anything. Like, you can't. How can you trust anything that you get? You're always trusting something. You're always reading the news, and it's always telling you something. Where are those sources coming from? And why can you trust them? They're coming from our institutions. So look, there is corruption in the institutions, absolutely. But we're risking throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And that's what I think is a big problem with these conspiracy theories. And just saying that, well, look, TPUSA and their donors, they didn't like what Charlie was doing. That is not proof that they killed him. That is not proof. Nowhere near it. That you can say almost anything. Some guy, there's tons of people that didn't like Charlie. Why aren't they implicated? And especially when you think about the Occam's razor thing, the most obvious, why don't you go with the one who clearly wanted to kill him? And then I can just ask questions like, look, Israel. Remember, Israel are the people. Like these conspiracy theorists saying Israel's behind all this stuff. They say that Israel killed Ghislaine Maxwell's father in what was supposedly a boating accident. He's out in the sea, by himself. He's got a couple guards with him, but next thing you know, he's just overboard and he's just drowned. He's dead. He had Mossad connections. He was connected to the Israeli government. He was Jewish, and he was running into tons of bankruptcy, problems and everything like that. His empire was crashing, and then he's dead. And then of course Ghislaine Maxwell is connected to Epstein and everything like that. Just kind of strange coincidences, right? But they say that Israel killed him. And look, here's the thing. I'm not totally ruling that out. I'll just be honest with you. I'm not totally ruling that out. But boy, did they make that thing look like a clear accident. Again, it was the perfect way to do it. And like, if Israel killed and that's my point, is if Israel killed Maxwell's father, boy, they did it. It was perfect. Again, out at sea, by himself, it's easy to make it look like a total accident. The guy just fell overboard and just drowned. That just looks total accidental. And then Israel, these are the people who put pagers in the pockets of Hamas agents and blew them up. And yet, boy, did they just fumble the Charlie Kirk assassination. You know what we're going to do, guys? We're going to kill Charlie Kirk. You know what else we're going to do? We're going to do it in public. And we're going to do it in front of a bunch of cameras. So that's when we do it, then we got to figure out how to get rid of the cameras and all the evidence. We're going to do it with a funny little bullet thingy, because there's different theories about whether it's the camera or it's another bullet, and then we're going to call it a 30-06. Just get the caliber completely wrong. It's going to be great. It's going to work out perfectly. I mean, like, when you start asking these questions, it's like, guys, this is the same Israel that we're saying are great at killing people, supposedly. And yet they just totally flounder this. Why? I was said in a video a while ago, it's like, you would think the Israel or the Mossad agents, the assassins, are just going, man, dude, why didn't we just while he was flying, just crash a plane or something like that? Just a terrible car accident. Why didn't we just do that? Man, did we screw this one up? Just, wow. Like, well, it would have been so much easier to do it like that, and yet they chose to do it in the most convoluted way, would make it the hardest to actually cover it up. I mean, the amount of hoops that this conspiracy theory has had to jump through, implicating so many different people, it begs the question. I mean, it's just, conspiracies work best when the fewest amount of people know about it. Fewer loose strings. But it's just, again, I just say Occam's razor. Just go with the simplest explanation until more information comes out, and then just go with that. But the thing is, I think for a lot of these conspiracy theorists, they have made their bed in this. So then when we got more information that even further implicated Tyler Robinson, they're like, no, no way, no. Again, they're like Teddy, DiCaprio's character in Shutter Island. All the evidence they gave right there, and just refused to believe it, just wouldn't believe it. Even when he fired a gun that in his eyes went off and in reality was a fake gun. Still wouldn't believe it. It took, well, of course in the end he eventually does, but that's a movie. Real life, it doesn't work that way. It's hard to get people out of this psychosis. I would dare to call it a psychosis. It really is. Candace has formed a cult, and to the point where now they are threatening people. They are threatening people for just questioning the questioners. And I just want to say this too as I close this. Let's talk about conspiracy theories. You want to do a real conspiracy theory? Try this one. Candace Owens has a history of grifting. She has an actual documented history of grifting. Okay, you can look it up. Now, of course, if you want to be a Candace cult defender, you rationalize that away. Well, she just changed her mind. All right, fine, whatever. Everybody can rationalize whatever they want. Very quick turn, if you ask me. A little bit unusual turn. But anyways, I digress. So, she has a history of grifting, I believe, which typically would make her dishonest. Maybe a leftist in disguise. I've certainly never liked Candace. I'll be honest. I just tell you that I've never liked her. I've just something about her just rubs me the wrong way. Never liked her. Charlie Kirk was the biggest threat to the left. I mean, he is single-handedly probably the main reason the conservative coalition to get Donald Trump reelected existed. I mean, he somehow managed to pull that off. The biggest threat to the left. So how about this? The left conspires to kill Charlie Kirk. And then after they kill Charlie Kirk, Candace gets a call. It's time to go to work, Candace. She's a sleeper cell for the left. She went to the right for a long time. I mean, her husband's very shady, does some shady business. Parler, he wanted to buy Parler. Parler was like, this guy, he ain't one of us. So Parler was sniffing this guy out a long time ago. I think he eventually got it, but anyways, there's strange stuff about it, Candace's husband, and their whole relationship, getting married 16 days after they met, it's weird stuff. So Candace gets a call. The sleeper cell is activated. It's time to go. Your job after we've killed the guy, is to start creating havoc in the conservative group. Split it up, get them fighting each other, and we're gonna win back, because there's no way we're beating this conservative coalition the way we're doing things right now. Subvert, distract, and separate, cause chaos in the movement. And so Candace's job is to make sure the guy who actually shot Charlie isn't, like, get him off the hook, or at least try. So enough discord, enough doubt, and we'll destroy the organization that was the greatest threat to us. If that is the truth, it's working pretty good. Now, the candy cult will look at me and go, you don't have any proof of that. How do you know they got the call? How hard would it be, using Candace's standards, for me to just go, to look at Candace's, just any kind of weird activity that Candace may have had. Hey, look, we have a phone call right here. Look at this. Who was she calling? Who called her? I could do this. I could do the same thing with no proof, none whatsoever. I can guarantee I could do it. Because that's exactly what Candace has been doing. That's what she's been doing. And look, my conspiracy theory, if you really think about it, kind of makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense, given what I just told you. But the point is we can all do this. The thing is it's all just conspiracy theories. For me, I want concrete data. And if I don't have concrete data, I have to be honest and say, that looks like it could be, but I just don't know for sure. Looks like this could have happened to Custer, but we just don't know until we actually have better information. And of course, with something like that, we're never really going to get much. I think it's pretty much what we have is what we got. And so as I would agree with this one guy I was watching on YouTube, I'm willing to be convinced that Israel did it, but I need some hardcore, concrete data. The same standards I apply whenever I do my own history studies. I need actual documentation. Well, they don't have it because, of course, that's the truth. That's the whole point of a conspiracy theory. They're covering it all up. See, that's Teddy in Shutter Island. No matter what we say, it's all a conspiracy. And in fact, the fact that there's no smoking gun is more proof of the conspiracy. That's the thing with conspiracy theorists. That's why you can never convince them. I told my dad about flat earthers, you can't convince these people because they have an explanation for everything, because they start with the presupposition that there is conspiracy to cover it up. And so when you start with that as your presupposition, then any information you don't have is not there because they're covering it up. That's the power of conspiracy theories. And I just think, and I was listening, I'll say this real quickly here. I was listening to, hopefully I have enough room. If the video gets cut off before I finish, I ran out of space on my phone. But I was listening to Nick Freitas talk about Tucker Carlson's conversation, his very pessimistic conversation with Sean Ryan, and talking about how, America has just been, we're in such a crap storm and everything like that, and what do we do? And it's just all almost borderline saying it's all doomed and we're all screwed, kind of thing like that. And of course, Nick Freitas totally disagrees with that. And he said something that I thought was really compelling. Doom scrolling sells. It really does. That's one of the reasons why Tucker is popular, because it sells. It makes money. That's why the Republicans never actually wanted to do anything. They never actually wanted to win, because they get more support when they're the opposition to the main majority party. When they're the underdogs fighting in the uphill battle. But when they're actually in control and they actually have the chance to do something, they're like, what do we do? We don't actually want to do anything. It's much easier. I get more support when I'm fighting the oppressors, but when we've actually kicked them out and I can have the control, well, I don't plan on doing anything. So it sells, and I think that's what one of the attractions of conspiracy theories is, because you have to ask yourself the question: what's harder to do? Is it harder to endlessly scroll through conspiracy theories with no verifiable, information about whether what this guy you just found on TikTok is saying is true? What are his what's this guy's credentials? What is it? How do I know his guy's just spitting stuff out and expecting me to believe it because it sounds interesting? Is it easy? Is it harder to do that and then just decide, man, there's so much, it's so bad, it's just, we're so screwed, nothing I can do. It's just so overwhelming. All I can do is repost this and that's it, and then do that, and then go back to your miserable life of redundancy? Or is it harder to go, we're in a bad spot, but we can make this work. It's time to get up and get active and do something. Let me put it to you this way. I just told you at the beginning of this video, I do evangelism. I get a lot of Christians who walk by whenever we're out there saying they love what we're doing. And I'm just like, well, there's let's see, 1, 2, 3 of us out here. Love to have you out here with us. You want to join us? Come join us. No. I like what you guys are doing, but I'm not going to help you. It's just, it's, as Jesus said, the harvest is plenty, but the laborers are few. And why are the laborers few? Because people just don't want to. It's the same reason they complain about the Republican representatives. It's funny. A lot of these people who are saying the Republican Party has failed them, and they have, are also basically saying like there's we're just screwed, man. We're just none of them. They don't want to actually get on the ground and do something, because doing something requires action. It requires maybe uncomfortable things. It's like they criticize the Republican Party, but they're kind of the same. It's easier to go on the internet and woe is us, the Republic is in dire, than it is to actually take action and do something. This guy who we're watching on this YouTube video was making fun of that guy I was telling you about, the big guy. He had the Christ is King on his hat, and yet he's threatening Andrew Wilson to fight him or something like that. And I'm just like, man, okay, first of all, it's not very Christian to behave like that. And what did Andrew Wilson do? All he did was challenge Candace Owens to a debate. Yeah, he insulted her a little bit. Yeah, that's Andrew Wilson, but whatever, who cares? Let's not be ladies, let's not be women here. Reacting emotionally. How dare you talk to my Candace like that? I won't slap you something, None of that. That's not one of the way Christians are supposed to behave. But I just see this hat and I'm just like, well, buddy, why don't you, instead of, brandishing your big muscles, and he's definitely got some big muscles, okay? He's bigger than me, that's for darn sure. Why don't you actually just pick up some tracts and come outside and share the gospel with people? Do that. Why don't you people do stuff like that? Why don't we do more of that? We got to get to the bottom of the Charlie Kirk's murder. I often wonder, what would Charlie say if he could come back and give us one piece of advice? What if Charlie came back and told us, look, guys, you're right, Israel did it, they killed me, there's this grand conspiracy to kill me, but you know what? The best thing you can do is get active and pick up the torch or the microphone where I left it and do what I was doing. But no, they won't do that stuff. The reason why? It's just easier to find the next conspiracy theory than it is to actually get active and try to do something about that in our local communities. It's much easier. And so, there you go. I have to say this one more thing. Hopefully I have enough space. I'm watching all this conspiracy theory stuff, and look, I gotta be honest, guys. The Republic has failed. I know I just talked about doom scrolling, but my point is a little bit different. Benjamin Franklin said, someone asked him, hey, what'd you guys get us? He said, a republic, if you can keep it. The more and more time goes by, the more and more I study history, the more I just start to think republics, democracies, I'm just starting to think that they are just complete total disaster. The reason why I think they just fail completely, and we're seeing it in real time, is because these perspectives, first of all, they're post-enlightenment worldviews, or perspectives, theories. They are based on Rousseau, and Locke, kind of theories and stuff like that. And the underlying assumption of Rousseau, for instance, Jean-Jacques Rousseau's theory of the general will, the underlying assumption beneath it of that is the assumption that the masses are basically good, and all you need to do is teach them reason, and they'll figure it out. You don't need elites over them. They can do it all themselves. That's like the concepts of democracy, which began back in ancient Greece, but they were kind of rediscovered in post-enlightenment worlds. But that democracy, republic systems, that's all you needed. Let's get rid of all the monarchs. Let's get rid of all the established post-feudal system. Let's just do this. I think after how long has it been? A little over 200 some odd years. I think we've sort of seen the results of that. And it's a total failure. Because again, it operates under the assumption that man is basically good. And that man, not the state, can figure this stuff out. Now, I'm not trying to say that the state in and of itself is great. It has plenty of its own failures. But I don't know, man. I just think, look what's happened with the fall of legacy media. Look what's happened. Now media is in the hands of everybody else, like me and you and Candace and this big buff guy, and all these people. They now have power. And now you're having all these internet wars on X, and it's just, I'm not even on X. I have to stay off of that, man. But I mean, it is total chaos on the internet. Total, complete meltdown chaos. There's so much information out there. For instance, when the Jack the Ripper case was, one of the reasons why it was never solved is because when the police were trying to get information, they were getting so many tips. They were getting just thousands of tips coming in about things that people saw, and that sounds like a good thing. But the problem is that is so much information can you imagine if you had a little piece of paper that told you the truth about something, but then it's buried in a huge stack of pieces of paper that are all lies? How do you find the truth in all of that? Because there's so much information out there now. That's like, how do I know what's true and what isn't anymore? The Iran war, I'm hearing stuff saying we're winning the war, and then we're not winning the war. It's just this happened, but that's actually this happened. And it's just like, what am I came to a point where I was like, dude, I don't even live over there. I don't know who's telling the truth. These guys are biased for Israel. These guys are biased for like anti-Israel stuff. I don't know who to pay attention to. I don't know, man. I'm just going to wait it out. I'm just going to wait and see what happens. The one thing I know right now that seems to be consistent information is that we're running out of rockets, and that's not a good thing, okay? That's like the one thing I know for sure seems to be collaborative across the board, by numerous sources. All right, that being said, but there's so much information out there now, but you don't really even know what to believe. And the reason why there's so much information out there is because legacy media has died. I mean, it's still around, but it's basically dead. It's just basically a carcass now. And I just can't help but think what's happened is we've liberalized media. But is that a good thing? I don't know, man. I really don't know. I'm starting to think like, maybe legacy media had a point when it said, if you give the reins of influencer to just some random Joe Schmo who's got no credentials, who's got no training in journalism. I mean, that's what Candace calls herself. She calls herself a journalist. She has no training in journalism. She has none. And in fact, when she was talking to Piers Morgan one time, she asked him, what are your journalistic credentials? And Piers Morgan's like, okay, I went to school. I have a degree in journalism, And she just completely changed the goalpost by saying, oh, yeah, we know how trustworthy that is. First of all, kids, you were asking cynically, what are your credentials? And they gave you credentials, and then you just suddenly went, oh, your credentials are crap. Because it's part of the institution. It's part of the elites. See, anything that's attached to the elites, like you can't, when you get refuted like that, then the tactic turns to, well, that's part of the elites. That's part of the bourgeoisie. Again, very communistic, right? That's part of the bourgeoisie, and we don't trust that. We're the people. We're the proletariat. Candace is the proletariat. Piers Morgan is the bourgeoisie. The institutions, they're the bourgeoisie. See how communistic this actually turns out to be? And so I just think, man, I just wonder, like, maybe what we've proven in these last couple of years, just a couple of years, maybe we've actually proven that we the people can't actually handle this. We don't do this very well at all because we're a bunch of morons. And my simple point is, if you have a government and you have a system in which the masses have power, I mean, I can't think of any example in which that actually turned out good. The French Revolution tried to do that, and boy, was that a bloodbath. And America came the closest. It's lasted the longest. But I don't even know if, like, causations, correlation does not automatically mean causation. I get that. Candace doesn't get that, but I get it. And her cult following doesn't get it. But at the same time, I just think, we're what, 250 years into this thing. Look where we're at. I think it's worth asking questions if that is the result of creating a system in which too much power has been given to the people, the masses. Voltaire was an Enlightenment thinker, but Voltaire also still understood the masses are stupid. They're really dumb. And they're especially dangerous in groupthink. Very dangerous in groupthink. And so Voltaire, he kind of believed in a system in which the monarchies were still reigning in power, but the monarchies were driven by Enlightenment thought and reason, not sort of like institutionalized authority from the Catholic Church. That's sort of rough way in which he believed. But I kind of think, looking at things now and the things that I've been thinking about, it's not too irrational to hold that position. Maybe that's something we need. We need something like that. Maybe we need the benevolent dictator. I don't know. I'm not saying I'm totally sold on that, but I look around and I just see, I recognize the sinfulness of man. I see the history of what the masses are capable of. It's never anything good. You give the masses the reins, because that's really what a republic is. That's what a democracy is. You are giving the authority to decide the future of the country to the masses. And that sounds great. Personal freedom. My voice carries weight in my government. But what if you're an idiot? What if the vast majority of people are not very well educated? They can read, they can write, they can do basic math, but they're also just total morons. They don't know how to do history. They don't actually do journalism, and they don't even know what the heck it is. And not knowing what the heck it is, think they're doing it. And because they're idiots, are further convinced that they're doing it. And then they attract a bunch of idiots who think that what they're doing is journalism because they're idiots. It just makes me think, man. It really makes me think. I kind of just go, man, maybe we were better under a monarch. Maybe we were. And people say, well, you want to go back to England. You want us to be, under the tyrant king. Again, there's nuanced history with that, guys. The king himself, I think it's King George, I think. Something third. I don't remember the numbers. I'm bad with that stuff. But look, guys. The simple fact though is he didn't have the power to just kind of I'm doing this to the Americas during the 13 colonies and before the American Revolution. He didn't have all that power. That was Parliament. The king had no real power. He's kind of just a monarch, just kind of represent the country like he kind of does now. That's about it. But it was all in the power of the Parliament. Oh, but the Declaration of Independence, it targets the king. Yes, because he's the representative of the British government. So yeah, that's why they sent it to him. But the whole notion that we were rebelling against the tyrant king Look, this is not true, guys. That's not really true. He did not have the power to actually do the things that the colonies were accusing him of doing. Now, I'm not saying America shouldn't exist. I'm not saying that. I'm just telling you the truth. I'm just telling you what actual history was. Um, the monarchs just, and my point is that we have these views in America because we're Americans of monarchs. They're all a bunch of tyrants. I mean, the whole no kings protests. Like, I'm like, actually, they weren't. The monarchs. Maybe you can argue the monarch in France, sure. Over, the from about the 1300s to the late 1700s after the French Revolution. Yeah, the monarch became ridiculously too powerful. Yeah, sure, you can make that argument, and I wouldn't disagree with you. But for the most part, the monarchs, for the most majority of medieval history, feudal history, were not absolute power by any stretch of the imagination. Just no. We like to think balance of power is only an American idea. No, it wasn't. It actually wasn't. No, no, no. That stuff was actually in place long before America got here. There are tons of stories you can read about the kings struggling against their own nobility, the clergy, and even the peasants. When the kings were being abusive, they had to risk potentially peasant uprising, and boy, did you not want that to happen. So in many instances, the kings were actually still afraid of their own people if they abused them. There were checks and balances in the medieval system. And I even looked this up. Did you know, statistically, you were more likely to die under the tyrannical regime of a republic than you are under a monarch? Statistically speaking, more people were killed in the French Revolution than were killed by any single monarch in world history. It's fascinating, isn't it? It's fascinating to think about that. You were statistically more likely to die, to be killed unjustly by the tyranny of a so-called republic and democracy than you were under a monarch. When I started looking into a lot of this stuff, it's just some of the things that I think about that just make me go, man, dude, like what? Stuff to think about. So I just hope what I've been able to provide is something to think about, for us in the future. What's the future of our country? Was legacy media, as faulty as it was, as corrupt as it was, did it have a point? That's, look, guys, we suck. We get it. But you guys, you're all a bunch of dummies. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're doing. And if we let you guys have control over journalistic integrity, you thought it was bad now. Boy, it's going to get really bad when you have a bunch of morons who don't know what they're doing, attracting a bunch of other morons who think that these morons know what they're doing. So that's all I got to say. I hope that's what I've provided here. If you've made it this far in the video, it's helpful to you. Provide some insight. Who knows? So I got to go. Made it through the whole thing. Sola Deo Gloria. God bless. Bye.